Hi all, our second instructive game today will have the theme of radical counterplay removal. To demonstrate this I'm going to choose the game Svidler versus Riazantsev. So this is being played in the Moscow Russian Championship, which is still currently ongoing. So this was in round 3. Svidler kicked off with e4 and Riazantsev played e6, the French defence, and we have here after knight c3, knight f6, the classical variation, but now f4 being played. So this is all standard stuff. After bishop e3, bishop e7, white prepares the castle queenside now with queen d2, so very aggressive stuff. After castles, white plays now d takes c5. You might ask why not castles queenside. I've had some experience in this line against Paul Georgiou in Blitz, and if black plays c4, this is often quite a crushing attack where white can't do much against black's pawn storm, so that's to be avoided. So a safety tip here, play d takes c5 to avoid black playing c4 if you're going to castle queenside. So d takes c5, and after bishop takes c5, now castle queenside, and it's quite safe to do that. Well, kind of. As we'll see in this game, there was a very radical method employed by Svidler to remove black's counterplay. After queen a5, white traded on c5, so black's potentially weak on these dark squares. Note now that with h4 there's a plan of h5, h6, and if black plays g6 we'll get another dark square weakness here and here. And I want you to think about that actually. This is a great plan for white in the variations which I've looked at with Rybka. They're quite educational actually for the nature of the position, because one key thing is that once black weakens these dark squares, this knight h2 to g4 to f6 is a critical idea. But this is only shown up in variations. So after rook av8, h6, so black now plays g6. However, you know, white can't just willy-nilly play this plan because there's a direct threat now of knight a4 using that pin to trade off queens. So white avoids that. Queen e3. There might be some other points to this move as well. Black plays knight a4 anyway, and we see now the softening up of white's king. Actually, that defensive knight on c3 means now that these two pawns are slightly weaker than usual, and after king b1, you know, black has got this latent threat of knight b4, and it's interesting actually that well, here it's harmless, but after rook fc8, Svidler still thinks that knight b4 is harmless. He plays the very calm move, rook d2, and I think this is the most intriguing move of the game, because a lot of players surely would be tempted to try and evict that queen with b3. But let's have a look. If b3, if the black queen moved to a3, then maybe, you know, c3 is good here to stop the knight b4. But comparing this to the game, this is a very passive setup for white. You know, maybe black can play a5 or something. So what Svidler did, there's also, if b3, by the way, queen a5 is another alternative, and you can see that white, if he's not careful, is going to get in severe trouble here. For example, queen d2 would be very dangerous. So knight b4, c4, and now b5, and white's in clear trouble, because if c takes b, rook c2. So white has to play this very carefully. What Svidler does is this rook d2, so he's allowing the seemingly, you know, quite dangerous knight b4, and after a3 he's provoking black to play this tactical move, rook takes c2. I'm sure he must have seen all this, so he takes on the knight, and now there's the decoy, rook c1 check, so the white king is coming into the firing line of queen, rook and bishop. So we'll see now, after queen a1, king c2 only move, rook c8 check, and now here is another only move, because if Svidler plays king d3, then it's actually a mate in 3, queen a6, and if say king d4, queen b6, king d3, bishop b5 mate. So basically another only move is played here, having to give up the queen. So only moves, by the way, in Informator, they're marked with a box symbol if you ever read Informator. And so this would be a box move, and after rook takes c3, king takes c3. Now black plays bishop b5, and I would consider here another virtual only move to avoid an unpleasant position is this King d4. So this is really precise calculation. I think this is where calculation is king in this kind of position. Because let's look at, more natural moves. Just fell, for example, rook f2 to defend that bishop. Just queen c1 check. After king d4, queen takes f4. And this is all going a bit pear shapes. Bishop e8. And, black apparently is crushing white now. It's because b6 is now a threat. So really this is not the sort of thing white would want. So this is not as good as the game. So king d4, very interesting move. Instead of this natural looking rook f2, just king d4. And after bishop takes f1, white plays the calm rook f2. So he's picking up now a material advantage in theory. 2 rooks and knight against the queen, but he's losing quite a few pawns. So he picks that up, but he loses now the b pawn, and he starts marching his king quite spectacularly, as though he's going to go to f4 and g5, which he actually does. So black played now f6 here, and white took on f6, and white is threatening all sorts of things. If he can get the rooks behind to the 8th rank, and this pawn will be a useful resource, this fawn pawn. After king g4, queen takes g2, king h4. So this has been an ultra sharp game really, and black continued with queen b2, but now white emerges with an advantage. Actually, Rybka actually recommends knight h2 here, so this knight h2 to g4 is still possible, but actually, maybe this is a strong move as well. Rook hg1, just sacrificing the f pawn, because after knight g5, it turns out that white has quite clear threats now on the f file. He just plays now the move king h3, another very calm and crushing move. If say rook f3, that would be a disaster. Queen h2 check. Well, it wouldn't be a disaster, but it just wouldn't be winning. It's equal, apparently. So king h3 stops the queen h2 check, and white is threatening to either double up rooks on the f file, or maybe even use the c file with rook c8. After a5, knight takes e6. It's apparent that rook f8 is quite a is a crushing threat. So if, for example, queen a3 check, rook g3, queen e7, and now just rook f8 is good enough. So after the queen is lost, white will be a rook up. So a very sharp game. Let's have a look at that in overview and summary. So it seems as though Svidler had no fear. He willingly allowed his king to come out in the open to get a material advantage, which required some only moves to be played, like this quite stunning, first of all offering the queen, but then this king d4. So able to play king d4 and here not worry about the checks so much as other lines, and picking up 2 rooks and knight versus queen, but still, the king having to march to h4 is, I think, a very entertaining game, as well as being a very sharp game. So after knight takes e6, black has had enough. I hope you enjoyed that game. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.